Elena Voss heard the door slam behind her before she even had time to set her bag down. 3 men in dark suits stood in the hallway of the mansion, blocking her path, their eyes cold and unreadable. Her heart pounded. She had only come to deliver the final seating chart for the gala. She had not expected to feel like a prisoner the moment she stepped inside. "Mr. Marchetti will see you now," one of the men said, his voice flat. Elena swallowed hard and followed him down a long marble corridor lined with paintings that looked older than the city itself. She had taken this job because it paid well and because her small event planning business needed the exposure. She had no idea, until this very moment, walking past armed guards who tried to look like ordinary staff, that she had signed on to work for one of the most powerful men in the entire region. The doors at the end of the hallway opened, and there he was. Dante Marchetti stood by the window, his back to her, looking out over the gardens like he owned the whole world. When he turned around, Elena felt something she could not explain. Not fear, though there was plenty of reason for that. Something else. Something that made her chest tighten in a way she did not like. "You're the planner," he said. It was not a question. "Elena Voss," she replied, keeping her voice steady, even though her hands were shaking behind her back. "I have the seating arrangement for Saturday. I need your approval before I finalize the printing." He walked toward her slowly, studying her the way a man studies something he is trying to figure out. "Most people who come into this house are nervous. You seem nervous too. But you're still standing here, talking business, instead of running out the door." "Should I be running?" Elena asked, surprising even herself with the boldness of the question. For the first time, Dante smiled. It was small, barely there, but it changed his whole face. "That depends on who you ask." She handed him the folder. He did not look at it right away. Instead, he kept watching her, like the papers in his hand meant nothing compared to whatever he was trying to read in her expression. Elena felt her cheeks grow warm and hated herself for it. This man was dangerous. Everyone in the city knew the name Marchetti, even if they pretended they did not. Whispers followed that name everywhere, stories of men who crossed him and were never seen again, of entire businesses that vanished overnight because he decided they should. And yet here she was, standing 3 feet away from him, unable to look away. "The seating is fine," he said finally, setting the folder on a table without opening it. "But I want you to handle something else, something more delicate. I'm an event planner, Mr. Marchetti. Not sure what else I could handle for you. Call me Dante," he said, "and I think you'd be surprised what you're capable of." Before she could respond, the door opened again, and a tall man with sharp eyes and gray at his temples stepped inside. He glanced at Elena, then at Dante, and something passed between them that Elena could not quite understand. Tension, warning. "A word," the older man said to Dante. "Alone." Dante did not move right away. He kept his eyes on Elena for one more second, long enough that she felt it in her stomach. Then he nodded and followed the man out into the hallway, leaving the door slightly open. Elena knew she should not listen. She knew it was none of her business, but her feet stayed rooted to the spot, and her ears caught every word. "Do you know who her father is?" The older man's voice was low but sharp. "I know," Dante answered. "Then you know what family she comes from. You know the history there. If anyone finds out you've brought her into this house, it will not matter that she is only planning a party. They will see it as something else. They will see it as a message, and it is a message we cannot afford to send right now. I hired a planner, Victor. That's all this is." "Is it?" Victor's voice dropped even lower, because from where I was standing, it did not look like business. Silence stretched between them. Elena's heart was racing so fast, she thought they might hear it through the wall. "Keep this professional," Victor said finally. "Nothing more. For your sake and for hers." When Dante walked back into the room, his expression had changed. The warmth from before was gone, replaced by something guarded, something careful. "The gala details are approved," he said. "My assistant will handle the rest of the communication from here." Elena nodded, gathering her things quickly, grateful for an excuse to leave. But as she reached the door, his voice stopped her. "Elena," she turned. "Thank you for coming personally. Most people send an assistant." "I like to handle important things myself," she said. Something flickered across his face again, that same look from before. "So do I." She left the mansion with her mind racing, replaying every word, every look, every strange feeling she could not name. She told herself it meant nothing. He was a client, a dangerous, complicated, mysterious client. but a client all the same. She had a business to run, and a father who had spent her entire childhood warning her about men exactly like him, men who lived in a world where loyalty and danger walked hand in hand. What Elena did not know was that miles away, in another part of the city, her father was sitting across from men of his own, men who had just received word that his daughter had walked into Dante Marchetti's home. And what Elena also did not know was that Dante Marchetti, a man who had built walls around himself so thick that even his closest allies rarely saw past them, could not stop thinking about the woman who had looked him in the eye without flinching. He stood at his window long after she left, staring at the empty driveway where her car had been, turning her name over in his mind like something fragile he was afraid to break. Victor was right. She was off limits. Her family's history with his was written in blood and broken promises that stretched back 2 generations. Getting close to her was reckless. It was the kind of mistake that could unravel everything he had spent his whole life protecting. But for the first time in longer than he could remember, Dante Marchetti did not care about being careful. He picked up his phone and dialed a number he knew by heart. "Find out everything about her," he said quietly. "Not for business, for me." On the other end of the city, Elena sat in her car outside her small office, gripping the steering wheel, trying to convince herself that the strange pull she felt toward Dante Marchetti was nothing more than curiosity, a reaction to danger, something that would fade the moment the gala was finished and she never had to see him again. She almost believed it. Almost. Because deep down, in a place she did not want to admit existed, she already knew this was only the beginning. 3 days passed before Elena heard from the Marchetti house again, and when she did, it was not the assistant Dante had promised would handle communication. It was Dante himself, standing outside her small office on a quiet street, looking completely out of place among the coffee shops and flower stands, dressed in a dark coat that made him look like he belonged in another century. "You said your assistant would handle this," Elena said, stepping outside, crossing her arms against the evening chill. "I changed my mind," Dante said simply. "That seems to be something you do a lot." He almost smiled again. "Only when it matters." Elena felt her resolve weakening, and she hated it. She had spent 3 days trying to push thoughts of him out of her mind, reminding herself of everything her father had taught her about men who lived in his world, about the kind of pain that world could cause. And yet here he was, and every warning she had memorized seemed to fade the moment he looked at her. "I need the final approval on the flower arrangements," she said, keeping her voice businesslike, even though her heart was doing something completely different. "That's all this is about, right?" "That's what I told my driver," Dante said, "but it's not really why I'm here." "Then why are you here?" He stepped closer, close enough that she could see the flecks of gray in his dark eyes, close enough that the cold evening air suddenly felt warm. "I wanted to see you again. I told myself I wouldn't, but I couldn't stay away." Elena's breath caught. "You know this is dangerous, for both of us." "I know," he said. "I've known since the moment you walked into my house and didn't run. My father." "I know who your father is," Dante interrupted gently. "I know what our families have been to each other. None of that changed what I felt standing in that room with you." Elena stared at him, torn between every rational thought telling her to walk away and something deeper, something she could not name, telling her to stay. "This can't happen," she whispered, even as she found herself stepping closer instead of farther away. "I know," Dante said again, his voice low, "but I'm here anyway." Neither of them moved for a long moment, standing in the cold evening light, caught between the world they came from and the one they were beginning, without either of them fully realizing it, to build together. Somewhere across the city, in a dimly lit room filled with men who answered to Elena's father, a phone rang with news that would soon change everything. She was seen with him again, the voice on the other end said, outside her office, alone. Elena's father set down his glass slowly, his jaw tightening. "Are you certain?" "Certain." He was quiet for a long time, staring at nothing, memories of old betrayals rising in his chest like smoke. "Watch her," he finally said. "Watch them both. If this becomes something more, I need to know before anyone else does." Back on the quiet street, unaware of the storm already gathering around them, Elena and Dante stood a little too close, saying nothing, both of them fully aware that whatever this was, it was already too late to stop. 2 weeks passed. And what began as stolen moments between business meetings slowly grew into something neither Elena nor Dante could deny any longer. He found reasons to visit her office. She found reasons to stay late, hoping he would show up. They met for coffee in quiet corners of the city where no one from either family would recognize them, and for a while, it felt like they had found a small pocket of the world that belonged only to them. Elena told herself it was harmless, a friendship, nothing more. But she knew she was lying to herself every time her heart lifted at the sound of his voice on the phone, every time she found herself smiling at nothing simply because she had seen him that day. Dante was no better at pretending. He had spent years building a reputation as a man who felt nothing, who made decisions with a clear head and no room for weakness. Elena Voss had become the one exception to every rule he had ever set for himself, and the strangest part was that he did not want to stop it. One evening, he invited her to a small restaurant tucked away on a side street, far from the busy parts of the city where anyone important might see them together. It was quiet inside, warm light and soft music, the kind of place that felt like it existed outside of time. "You never talk about your family," Dante said, watching her over the candlelight. Elena hesitated, twirling her glass slowly. "There's not much to say. My father and I don't speak much anymore. He wanted a different life for me than the one I chose." "What kind of life did he want?" "One far away from people like you," Elena said, and then immediately regretted how blunt it sounded. Dante did not flinch. "He's not wrong to want that for you." "Maybe not," Elena admitted, "but I'm not sure I want that kind of safety anymore." The words hung in the air between them, heavier than either of them expected. Dante reached across the table and took her hand, and for the first time, neither of them pulled away. "I need to tell you something," he said quietly. "Something I should have told you the day we met." Elena's stomach tightened. "What is it?" "The business my family runs. It's not what you think it is. It's not just real estate and imports and the things I've let you believe. There's more to it, Elena. Things I've done, things my family has done. That would change how you see me if you knew all of it." Elena pulled her hand back slowly, her mind racing. "What are you saying?" "I'm saying that the world I live in is dangerous in ways you don't fully understand yet. And I care about you too much to keep hiding that from you." Before Dante could explain further, his phone buzzed sharply on the table. He glanced at it, and his expression changed instantly, the warmth draining from his face, replaced by something hard and alert. "I have to go," he said, standing quickly. "Dante, wait. Stay here. Someone will drive you home safely. I'll explain everything soon, I promise." He was gone before she could stop him, disappearing into the night, with two of his men falling into step beside him, leaving Elena alone at the table with more questions than she had ever had in her life. She did not go home. Instead, driven by a need to understand what she had just stumbled into, she followed at a distance, staying far enough back that she would not be seen, close enough to see Dante and his men enter a warehouse near the docks. She waited outside in the shadows, her heart pounding, telling herself she would leave the moment anything felt truly wrong. What she overheard through a cracked window changed everything. Voices raised in argument, threats exchanged, the name Marchetti spoken with fear and respect in the same breath. She heard enough to understand that Dante was not simply a businessman with a complicated family history. He was the head of an operation that controlled entire parts of the city through fear, and the men inside that warehouse had crossed him in ways that came with serious consequences. Elena backed away slowly, her hands shaking, her mind spinning with everything she had just learned. She had known, somewhere in the back of her mind, that the whispers about the Marchetti name were more than rumors. But hearing it, seeing it with her own eyes, made it impossible to keep pretending otherwise. She drove home in silence, tears blurring her vision more than once, replaying every moment she had spent with Dante, wondering how much of what she felt for him had been real, and how much had been her own foolishness. Her phone rang before she reached her apartment. It was Dante. She almost did not answer, but something made her pick up. "Elena, where are you? I need to know you're safe." "I saw you tonight," she said quietly. "At the warehouse. I heard everything." Silence stretched on the line, long and heavy. "I'm sorry you had to see that," Dante finally said, his voice low. "I never wanted you to be part of that world." "Is it true? Everything they say about your family?" "Some of it," he admitted. "More than I wish were true. But Elena, listen to me. Whatever you think of me now, I need you to know that what I feel for you is real. It's the one honest thing in a life built on things I'm not proud of." Elena closed her eyes, leaning her head against the steering wheel, torn between the fear coursing through her and the undeniable pull she still felt toward him despite everything. "I need time," she whispered. "I need to think." "Take whatever time you need," Dante said. "But please, be careful. If people connected to your father learn that you know the truth about me, about us, it could put you in more danger than you realize." The call ended, and Elena sat alone in her car outside her apartment, staring up at the dark windows of her home, feeling for the first time truly and completely afraid. She did not know that, at that very moment, her father was receiving a full report detailing every meeting, every dinner, every quiet moment she had shared with Dante Marchetti over the past 2 weeks. She did not know that men loyal to her father were already discussing what to do about it. And she did not know that Dante, standing alone in the cold night air outside the warehouse, was making a decision of his own, one that would either save her from the danger closing in around them or pull her deeper into it than either of them could imagine. For 3 days, Elena did not answer Dante's calls. She buried herself in work, trying to convince herself that distance was the answer, that walking away now was the only sensible choice left to her. But every quiet moment brought his voice back to her mind, the way he had looked at her across the candlelit table, the honesty in his eyes when he admitted the truth about his world. On the 4th day, everything changed. Elena was closing up her office late in the evening when a black car pulled up outside, different from the ones Dante usually sent. 2 men stepped out, neither of them familiar, both of them wearing the same guarded expression she had seen on Victor's face weeks earlier. Her stomach dropped. "Elena Voss," one of them said. It was not a question. "Can I help you? Your father sent us. He wants to see you. Tonight." Elena's mind raced. Her father had not requested to see her in over a year, not since the day she had told him she wanted nothing to do with the life he had built, the constant looking over her shoulder, the friends who disappeared without explanation, the fear that lived in every corner of their house when she was a child. If he was calling for her now, it could only mean one thing. He knew. She rode in silence to a part of the city she had not visited in years, to the house where she had grown up, where the walls still held memories she had spent a long time trying to forget. Her father was waiting for her in his study, standing by the fireplace, his face unreadable in the flickering light. "Sit down, Elena. I'd rather stand." He studied her for a long moment, and when he spoke, his voice was quiet, but sharp, with barely restrained anger. "Do you have any idea what you've done, spending time with a Marchetti? Do you understand what that man's family has done to ours? What his father did to your uncle?" "I didn't know who he was at first," Elena said, though even as the words left her mouth, she knew they would not be enough to satisfy him. "And once you found out," her father pressed, "did that stop you, or did it make it worse?" Elena said nothing, and her silence was answer enough. Her father closed his eyes, pressing his fingers to his temple, as though trying to hold back something much larger than words. "This isn't a game, Elena. If word gets out that my daughter is involved with Dante Marchetti, it will not matter to anyone that you're innocent in all of this. Every enemy that family has made will see you as a target. Every enemy I have made will see you as a way to strike at me. You could be hurt, or worse, simply for being close to him." "I care about him," Elena said quietly, finally admitting it out loud, even to herself. "I know it's complicated. I know what it means. But I can't just pretend I don't feel what I feel." Her father's expression softened for the briefest moment, some old memory flickering behind his eyes, before hardening again into resolve. "Then you leave me no choice but to protect you myself." Elena did not understand what he meant until 2 days later, when she learned that men connected to a rival family, one with old grudges against both the Marchettis and her own father, had discovered the truth about her relationship with Dante. What should have remained a private matter had become a weapon, a piece of information too valuable and too dangerous to stay hidden. She was walking home from a late meeting when a car pulled up beside her, moving slowly, matching her pace. She quickened her steps, her heart hammering, memories of every warning she had ever received flooding back all at once. The car stopped ahead of her, blocking the sidewalk, and a man stepped out, his face calm in a way that made her blood run cold. "Elena Voss," he said, echoing the same greeting she had heard days earlier, though this time it carried none of the same intent. "You've made some interesting choices lately. I don't know what you're talking about, Elena said, backing away slowly. I think you do. Dante Marchetti seems quite fond of you. That makes you valuable to certain people, and valuable people tend to get used. Before Elena could react, a second car screeched around the corner, and out stepped two men she recognized instantly as part of Dante's inner circle. The first man's expression flickered with surprise before hardening into something colder. Get in the car, Elena, one of Dante's men said firmly, positioning himself between her and the stranger. Now, Elena did not argue. She climbed into the car with shaking hands, watching through the window as the two groups of men exchanged tense words she could not hear, watching as the stranger finally backed away, disappearing into the night with a warning look that told her this was far from over. She was taken directly to Dante, who was waiting when the car arrived, his face pale with a fear she had never seen on him before. The moment she stepped out, he pulled her into his arms without a word, holding her so tightly it was as though he was afraid she might disappear if he let go. I told you to be careful, he said, his voice rough with emotion. I didn't do anything wrong, Elena said, still shaking. They just appeared. I know, Dante said, pulling back to look at her, his hands framing her face gently. This is exactly what I was afraid of. The moment people connected you to me, you became a target. This is my fault. It's not your fault, Elena insisted, though her voice trembled. I chose this too. Dante closed his eyes briefly, as though gathering strength for what he had to say next. I need to end this. Not us, but the threat. I can't let anyone believe for one more day that hurting you is a way to hurt me. I need to make it clear, to everyone, that anyone who comes near you will answer to me directly. Dante, that sounds dangerous, I know, he finished for her. But letting this continue is more dangerous, for you especially. That night, Dante called together the men closest to him, the ones who had stood beside him through every difficult decision his family's business had ever required. Victor was among them, his expression grim as Dante laid out exactly what needed to happen to secure Elena's safety once and for all. You're certain about this, Victor said quietly, once the others had left the room. Once you make this move, there's no going back. Every family that respects boundaries will understand, but the ones who don't, the ones behind tonight's incident, they will see this as a declaration. Then let them see it as one, Dante said firmly. I'm done pretending she doesn't matter to me. I'm done letting fear decide who I'm allowed to care about. Victor studied him for a long moment, something like respect flickering across his weathered face. Your father would have made the same choice. Once, for a woman he loved. It didn't end well for him. Then I'll make sure it ends differently for me, Dante said. Elena, watching from the doorway where she had been waiting, unseen, felt her heart swell with something powerful and terrifying all at once. She understood now, fully and completely, what it meant to be loved by a man like Dante Marchetti. It meant danger, yes. It meant a life unlike anything she had ever imagined for herself. But it also meant a man willing to risk everything, his empire, his safety, even his life, simply to make sure she was protected. She stepped into the room, and Dante turned to find her standing there, having heard every word. I'm not running from this, Elena said quietly. Whatever happens next, I want to face it with you, not hidden away somewhere safe while you fight alone. Dante crossed the room and took her hands in his. This isn't going to be easy, Elena. Once this begins, there's no simple ending. I know, she said. I'm choosing it anyway. Outside, the city continued on, unaware of the storm quietly building within it, unaware that two people from opposite sides of a long and painful history had just decided, together, to face whatever came next. Word traveled fast through the city, once Dante made his intentions known. Within a day, every family, every rival, every old enemy of the Marchetti name understood that Elena Voss was no longer simply an outsider caught in the middle of old conflicts. She was under Dante's protection, publicly and completely, and anyone who threatened her would answer directly to him. For some, this news brought quiet respect. Loyalty was a language everyone in that world understood, and a man willing to declare himself so openly for someone he loved earned a certain measure of admiration, even among those who might otherwise be his enemies. But for others, particularly the family behind the incident on the sidewalk days earlier, it was seen as an opportunity rather than a warning. Marco Delgado had spent years building resentment toward the Marchetti name, resentment passed down from his own father, who had lost everything in a conflict with Dante's family long before Dante had taken control. He saw Elena not as an innocent woman caught between two worlds, but as the perfect weapon to finally settle old scores. He gathered his own men within days, moving carefully, planning an approach that would strike where Dante least expected it, not through violence against Dante himself, which would only invite retaliation too costly to survive, but through something quieter, more calculated. He would take Elena, hold her just long enough to force Dante into a position of weakness, to extract concessions that would shift the balance of power in the city permanently. Elena, unaware of the depth of the danger gathering around her, tried to return to some semblance of normal life in the days that followed. She continued running her business, though now surrounded by quiet, watchful men who accompanied her everywhere, a constant reminder of just how much her world had changed. Dante visited her every evening, and slowly, despite the tension hanging over everything, they began to build something real between them, unhurried and honest, in a way neither of them had expected to find in the middle of so much danger. "Do you ever wish things were simpler?" Elena asked one evening, sitting beside him on the balcony of his home, watching the lights of the city spread out below them. "Every day," Dante admitted, "but I don't think I'd trade this, complicated as it is, for a simpler life without you in it." Elena smiled, leaning her head against his shoulder, allowing herself, for just a moment, to believe that maybe they could find their way through this after all. That fragile peace, shattered 11 days later. Elena was leaving a supplier meeting downtown, her guard for the afternoon momentarily distracted by a phone call, when a van pulled up beside her with practiced efficiency. She barely had time to register what was happening before hands grabbed her, pulling her inside. A cloth pressed briefly over her mouth before darkness took over. When Elena woke, she was in an unfamiliar room, dim and windowless, her hands bound loosely in front of her. Marco Delgado sat across from her, calm and composed, studying her with the same cold curiosity a man might show an interesting piece in a collection. "I apologize for the rough introduction," Marco said, "but I needed to speak with you somewhere private." "What do you want?" Elena demanded, her voice steadier than she felt. "Leverage," Marco said simply. "Dante Marchetti has made himself vulnerable for the first time in his life, and I intend to use that." Elena's blood ran cold, but she forced herself to stay calm, remembering everything she had learned about the world she had stumbled into over the past weeks. "He'll come for me." "I'm counting on it," Marco said with a thin smile. "That's exactly the point." Meanwhile, when Dante learned of Elena's disappearance, the calm control he had spent years perfecting cracked completely for the first time anyone could remember. Victor had never seen him so unraveled, pacing his study with barely restrained fury, every instinct in him screaming to act immediately, recklessly, regardless of consequence. "We need to think clearly," Victor urged. "Marco wants you to act without thinking. Don't give him that." "He has Elena," Dante said, his voice tight with barely controlled rage. "Thinking clearly is not exactly at the top of my priorities right now. If you go in blind, you'll get her killed, and yourself along with her," Victor said firmly. "We find out where she is. We plan carefully, and then we go in with everything we have." It took 6 agonizing hours to locate the building where Marco was holding Elena, hours during which Dante barely spoke, his mind consumed entirely with worry and a determination that frightened even the men who had known him for years. When the location was finally confirmed, he moved quickly, gathering the most trusted men from his organization, formulating a plan with Victor that balanced speed against caution. Inside the building, Elena had spent the hours trying to keep her composure, watching Marco's men, learning the rhythm of their movements, searching for any opportunity that might present itself. She had grown up around this world, even if she had spent years trying to distance herself from it, and some part of her, buried deep, still remembered the lessons her father had once tried to teach her about staying alert, about never assuming safety in a room full of dangerous men. When the sound of a disturbance echoed from somewhere outside the room, Elena's heart leapt with hope, though she forced herself to stay still, to wait for the right moment. The door burst open minutes later, and Dante stood in the doorway, flanked by his men, his eyes finding Elena instantly across the room, relief and fury warring across his features in equal measure. "Let her go, Marco," Dante said, his voice deadly calm in a way that carried more weight than shouting ever could. "This ends now, One way or another. Marco rose slowly, unbothered, or at least pretending to be. You came alone into a building full of my men. Bold, but perhaps not wise. I didn't come alone, Dante said. As if on cue, more of Dante's men filed into the room from multiple entrances, quickly outnumbering and surrounding Marco's remaining forces, most of whom had already been dealt with outside. Marco's confident expression faltered for the first time. This doesn't have to go further, Dante said, stepping carefully into the room, his eyes flicking briefly to Elena to reassure himself she was unharmed, before returning to Marco. Release her, and we discuss terms. Continue this, and I promise you, there will be no terms left to discuss. Marco glanced around at the shifting balance of power in the room, calculating quickly, understanding the position he now found himself in. Slowly, he nodded to one of his remaining men, who moved to untie Elena's hands. The moment she was free, Elena rushed across the room into Dante's arms, and for a long moment, neither of them cared about anything else happening around them, the tension of the standoff fading into the background as relief flooded through both of them. I'm here, Dante murmured against her hair. I've got you. You're safe now. The negotiations that followed were tense, but ultimately favorable to Dante's position, given the leverage he now held. Marco, humiliated and weakened, agreed to terms that would keep him and his family away from both Elena and the Marchetti organization permanently. A fragile peace bought through strength rather than trust, but a peace nonetheless. In the weeks that followed, life slowly began to settle into something resembling normalcy, though neither Elena nor Dante would ever again take safety for granted. Elena's relationship with her father, strained for so long, began to mend slowly as he came to understand the depth of what existed between his daughter and the man he had once considered an enemy. It was not an easy acceptance, but it was a start, built on the recognition that Elena had chosen this path with clear eyes and a strong heart. Dante, for his part, found himself changed in ways he had never expected. The walls he had built around himself for years, the careful distance he had always kept from anything that might be used against him, had crumbled the moment he chose to fight for Elena openly, rather than hide what she meant to him. And rather than making him weaker, as he had once feared, it had made him more respected than ever, a man whose loyalty and protection extended fiercely to those he loved. One evening, months after everything had settled, Dante brought Elena back to the same quiet restaurant where he had first tried to tell her the truth about his world. The candlelight flickered between them just as it had that first night, though everything about their situation had changed completely since then. Do you ever regret it? Dante asked quietly, watching her across the table. Getting involved with someone like me, with everything that came with it? Elena reached across the table and took his hand, the same way he had once taken hers, offering the same quiet reassurance, not for one single moment. I was told you were off limits. That being near you would only bring danger and heartbreak. But what I found instead was a man willing to risk everything for the people he loves, someone whose loyalty and strength I've never seen matched by anyone else. Dante brought her hand to his lips, pressing a gentle kiss against her fingers. I was told the same about staying away from you. I'm glad neither of us listened. Outside the restaurant, the city continued its endless rhythm, unaware that within its walls, two people who had once been forbidden from finding each other had built something strong enough to withstand every danger thrown against it. Their story, once whispered about in fear and warning, had become instead a testament to the fact that some connections are simply too powerful to be stopped by boundaries drawn by others, no matter how dangerous the world around them might be. And as Dante Marchetti looked across the table at the woman who had once been completely off limits, he understood, more clearly than he ever had before, that some risks were always worth taking.